Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I'm joined today by a very special guest. She has been a massage therapist for 19 years. She's an expert level MFR therapist. She's been introduced to MFR since 2015. She's a private practice owner. She's a sailor, an artist, and has a lot of projects with her Rivermead retreats. It's my honor to introduce Leslie Fraser Breneman. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I know that you've been in myofascial release for a bit. How did you first get into this work?
I was having problems with my neck that no doctor or PT or physiatrist or anybody could figure out, and they kept telling me that it was all in my head. There was nothing wrong with me. I had dry needling done. I had all sorts of things done, and nothing was helping. And I just barely could move my head. I was in so much pain. It was going on for like 8 months. And so out of sheer desperation, I asked a friend of mine who had taken a few Barnes classes if she would work on me. And she proceeded to work on my abdominal area for like 45 minutes, spent about 45 minutes working on my belly. And I started kind of like, my legs kind of started twitching. I started to unwind. I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea what Barnes's work was about. Then she spent maybe 10 minutes on my neck at the end with very gentle holds on my neck. And I got up for the first time in 8 months. My head floated back where it belonged on my body and the pain was gone. So I was like, all right, what is this sorcery? I have to get to the source and find out what this is about. And that was it. Like, got my first class in down on the Cape in 2015, and I was hooked.
That's awesome. Now, when you were going through this pain and you're going through these other modalities, like I think you had mentioned trigger point dry needling and different PTs or whatever professionals, and you weren't getting that help, how did you feel in that moment that prompted you to kind of get to this level of desperation?
I just was super frustrated, and I had come from a medical family. My father was a radiologist, so I to me, that was always the go-to, was to go straight to the medical community. And just that incredible frustration that I think so many of our clients and patients feel is not like feeling like it's all in your head and there's nothing wrong with you, and you're like, but there is something wrong. Something's not right. Like it's So it turned out it was my psoas that was like hauling me forward, because it was all tied up and my belly was all tied up, and I had all these restrictions that were down there that were pulling me forward. And so once that got released, it was, I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Absolutely. Okay, so something that Leslie is talking about is one of your hip flexor muscles. It's called your psoas. And something that we learn in myofascial release that doesn't get adopted amongst the larger healthcare community is that the body is a full system. So everything is connected, and not just saying it's connected, but actually each organ and muscle becomes the next thing. They're not separate things. And with the psoas specifically, those fibers are directly intertwined with your diaphragm. And so when you do a cadaver dissection, where you kind of cut open a dead body and study it, you actually can't separate those fibers. But when we learn about these things, especially in, let's say for me, PT school, where we have to learn the anatomy and physiology of the human body, we kind of learn things in separate components. And so it's very interesting for you to have dealt with this neck pain for 8 months, you said.
Yep.
And then out of desperation, you asked this friend to help you with, and she happens to do myofascial release, and she didn't even work on your neck for the first 45 minutes.
Nope.
When you were laying on the table or getting treated, when she started working on your abdomen, were you a little bit confused, or were you just kind of
I remember actually thinking to myself, all right, I'll play your silly game. It's my neck that hurts, not my stomach.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay. And that's because oftentimes the root of the pain is not where it hurts. I think a lot of times what tends to happen is we just chase the symptoms, right?
Yep.
So that's the thing that hurts or feels tense, but the root of that is often somewhere else. And if
Yep.
you work with a skilled therapist, they're often able to kind of navigate through your body where the source is so that ultimately when you fix that, then the part that's being affected also gets that relief. Now, you said you're like, "Okay, I'll play your silly game." And what did you feel in that moment, if you can remember?
I can remember my right leg kind of doing this, like, the weird little twitches that they, and at that time, I mean, I call it weird, but it wasn't weird. It's not weird. But in that moment, I was like, why is my right leg kicking out? Why is it twitching? Why is it jumping like spontaneously? I didn't understand. And I asked her, I was like, what's going on? Why is my leg twitching? And she was like, it's all totally normal. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And I'm like, yep. Okay. All right. And I trusted her because and I was also desperate. I was like, I needed help and I couldn't get help elsewhere. So it was shocking to me that, like, I realized that there was so many more connections and how everything's connected. And, as John Barnes said for in every class that I went to of, listen to the symptoms, treat the symptoms, but look elsewhere for the cause.
100%. Now, something that you mentioned is this involuntary movement, and that's what we refer to as unwinding.
Yes.
And I think the first time you feel that, you're gonna say it's a little bit weird. And
It
what we like to say is it's just interesting.
Interesting.
You got it.
But
And
in that moment, it felt weird.
yeah, absolutely, because it's something that it's not you consciously doing it, but
Yeah,
I think it's because you trusted the therapist that you were working with, that
yep,
you allowed yourself to get there. And
absolutely.
so this isn't anything that we force and we get people to do or induce. It's just something that naturally happens if they are feeling vulnerable and trustworthy enough in the therapist.
Absolutely.
So then you have this experience where you're like, wow, this neck pain that I've been dealing with for so long is
It's
gone.
vanished. It's gone. It was gone.
And then did that start your MFR journey?
Oh, absolutely. Within, 8 months or something, I got myself to MFR1 down on the Cape in Massachusetts and was like, and then I watched another colleague get up on stage as a demo and start to unwind, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is it. This is what's missing." And I just remember John being like, I think he asked, "Does anybody have any questions?" And I just involuntarily, my arm shot up in the air. I didn't even think about it. I just kind of my arm shot up and I just stated, I was like, tears were like pouring down my face. Like it wasn't even me on the stage. And I was like, she's so vulnerable. And everyone just kind of silently like nodded their heads and was like, yeah, this is what it's about. This is that vulnerability, allowing yourself to be vulnerable. It was so touching to me and so beautiful. I just was all in.
Okay, that's an interesting response because I know that in my first course that was taught by John, and I saw an unwinding on stage, I like was curious, but I was a little bit
Little skeptic.
frightened. Yeah, like very skeptical, because I was just like, I remember seeing the person unwind and it looked pretty violent, and I think they had gone through like a car accident or something. And so they're kind of reliving or
Yeah,
processing these positions of past trauma. And it looks a little bit wild,
it
I would
does.
say. And I remember looking around because I was like, dude, she's having a seizure on the stage and nobody is wanting to help. I remember like, yo, we should call like 911, like somebody needs to be here. But everybody else is just sitting there very calmly and intently and
Taking
just
it in. Yep.
watching. And then, they finish the demo and the person shares their experience and it's totally normal. But I think the thing that makes it quote unquote weird, even though it's absolutely normal,
Hmm.
is that we're just not exposed to it?
Right.
Something that John says is without awareness, there's no choice. And
Exactly.
without the awareness that, like, hey, authentic healing can look like this. It's not going to look like it all the time, but it can
No.
look like this. Then is that something that we can accept? And
Right.
oftentimes that friction comes from us having our own belief systems that aren't inclusive of this authentic healing process.
Yes.
So it's interesting for you to say, man, she was so vulnerable. And for me to have like a weird,
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, what is
Yeah.
going on here?
Yeah, I remember looking around the room and there were a lot of different reactions. I remember a couple of people saying like, "Oh, this has to be staged." And I was like, that no, that was as authentic as it can get. Like she and I remember who it was. She's actually a friend of mine, and I just was so in awe of the allowing herself to be that vulnerable in this room full of like there was I mean it was a full class as they often are. I just remember just be like I was so taken with that. I just thought that that was such a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. And you bring up the word vulnerability. And I think in our society, especially as a man, we're taught to repress our emotions, to not
Mhm.
show weakness, quote unquote. But I think there's so much strength in being vulnerable because
I agree.
one, you kind of allow yourself to be imperfect, and nobody's perfect. And
Right.
once you are able to kind of show that, it gives other people the ability to also be vulnerable and show that they're not perfect. And it creates this level of, I want to say, like empathy that is felt.
Yeah.
And I think that we need more of that. I think there's a version of myself, an older version, where I pretended like everything was perfect.
Right.
And what I'm learning today is like, yo, it's not perfect. And
Yeah.
the more I pretend to be perfect, that's just a lot of energy that is being wasted on whether it's wearing a mask or people pleasing or doing these things that I used as maybe survival mechanisms when I was younger, where I don't necessarily want to carry that on today. How
Right.
has your journey been with being vulnerable?
Well, I mean, I feel like I tend to be a bit of an open book. Like I don't have a problem with being vulnerable. And I find it fascinating because a lot of my clients will come in and you maybe are doing a little something on, on their chest, just above their heart, and they start to cry immediately. And their first reaction is, to apologize. They're always so often apologizing for crying. And I'm like, no, this is a safe space. You're like, please do not apologize. There's no need to be sorry for feeling your emotions. And it's teaching clients and patients to understand that it's okay. It's encouraged. It's not just okay, it's encouraged to be vulnerable and that that's a safe space and that what happens in that room stays in that room and it's between the two of us or between them and themselves that, it's not going to go any further and it's, creating that safe space for people.
Absolutely. Now, something that I remember when I first got introduced to this work is holding space. You said
Yeah.
like it's a safe space. And I know for myself, coming from a physical therapy background, I was like, I don't even know what that means. Can you
Really?
elaborate on what that means? I know what it means now
Yeah.
because I've done the work, but I know when I was coming in from this kind of this education system where it's like about the textbook and the anatomy and all that,
Right.
holding space was something that was foreign to me. So can you elaborate in your own words what that means to you?
I mean, it means a lot of different things, but it's, creating an environment for somebody where they can feel safe. Ultimately, is the simple as that. And sometimes I remember in John's classes him showing that in different ways, between dialoguing and then also we would do the exercises where you would sit across from each other and somebody would be vulnerable and speak and say, I'm sure you probably remember this too, say something that feels really hard for them. And you would have to sit there without any expression on your face and just listen. And it was like so hard to do. I would feel like the tears would start coming up for me as I listened, but that's kind of what it boils down to is just creating a space, creating an environment where people can allow themselves to feel without judgment, without any you giving your input or your advice or you're telling them what to do or how to feel or how to be. It's just letting them be who they are.
I think that's one of the best ways and simplest ways to love somebody is like just allow them to be themselves, you know?
Yep.
And I think that the exercise that you're talking about, I think they refer to it as mind games, where,
Mind games. Yeah.
there's a person A and a person B
Yep.
and they sit across from each other. And I will say that that exercise of just being able to say what is on your heart because maybe you haven't had the time or the space to be able to express it and have someone sit there. It could even be a stranger, but sometimes it's somebody you know.
Yes.
And it's like it allows you just to like get it off your chest because otherwise it's kind of like something where oftentimes you feel like, man, I need to say this, but I haven't found the right time or the space. And I'll just say that it's very powerful, and I wish I did that more. Every time I do it, I'm like, "This is amazing. We need to adopt this." And then when I get back home, I slowly go back into my old habits, and life gets busy, and then I forget to pause
Yep.
and smell the roses.
Yeah.
So that's just a good reminder for me. That's something that I'm
Yeah.
gonna do, and if anyone is listening, I would encourage them to do it as well. So then you take your first class. Did you immediately start taking a bunch of classes after that, or how did that
Oh,
go?
yeah, I think it took me I was in the middle of a divorce at the time, so I was starting a divorce, so it was a little bit harder. My son was quite young, so it was, getting time away. I would have to, like, kind of justify it and, find a way to get away, and I would call it professional development because that was kind of my excuse to be able to go to take the classes. But the more classes I took, like even the following year, just taking the next 3 classes, I realized that this was not just professional development. This was very much a personal journey that I was beginning to go down, learning so much about myself, healing my own wounds, my own, inner child. Just really, it became not so much about the work as it was. I mean, it was obviously about the work, but it was really became kind of about me. And the more I healed myself, the more I was able to help my clients heal.
That's awesome. You've mentioned a lot of things. Can you take us through what it means to heal from your wounds, your inner child wounds, I think you had mentioned, ultimately to help yourself, and then in doing so, you're able to help others?
Well, let's see. Working on my own inner child wounds. We all have our own, things that happen, like the traumas that we've happened in our lives that we don't necessarily think of as traumas. Even like a lot of my clients, when they come in, if I ask them to write down like what traumas they may have had occur in their lives, and they don't think of the things that are traumas. They think of like it has to either be like something horrific like a car accident, or they had to have a surgery, or it has to have been something like really profound, or a concussion, like any head trauma. Oh well, I hit my head but didn't go to the hospital. I think I might have had a concussion but never did anything about it. Like, well, that's a trauma that made an adjustment to your likely made an adjustment to your head bone, your cranial bones, and probably needs some work. So, I mean, there was even an example of I had a fear of heights for years and years and years and years and years. And when I had an unwinding out in Sedona during one of my classes, I saw myself in the old apple tree here in my yard here. And my brother and my cousin had climbed up the top of the tree. And I was probably like 7, maybe 8 years old. And I kind of was wanting to be one of the big kids and, climbed all the way up the tree as far as I could get. And then I got scared and was like, they went all the way to the roof of the house. And I was like, I can't go up. I can't go down. I don't know what to do. And I was like, just paralyzed with fear. And my uncle had to come and get me down out of the tree. And for years after that, I mean, I would go on a bridge and my toes would curl, my hands would like tighten up, terrified of heights. And then after I had the unwinding where I remembered where the fear had begun, where it had started, where it was initiated, I was able to go out onto what is it called? Devil's Bridge out in Sedona, and go out and like starfish out in the middle of Devil's Bridge, and like zero fear of heights anymore. And I don't have a fear of heights anymore. So like releasing some of those old traumas that we don't even think of as traumas, but also the ones, having a bicycle accident, getting rear-ended, getting, all the different the splatter marks, as John calls them, of on the tapestry of our canvas, that they all kind of cover one another over, and it just turns into a big messy blob after a while.
Absolutely. I think you bring up a good topic, and it's around the topic of trauma, and I think
Mm.
the way that I'm able to kind of understand it better is there's capital T or big T trauma, and then there's lowercase t trauma. And the capital T is like the big things, like car accidents or surgeries or
Mhm.
sexual abuse, those kinds of things that like make your stomach curdle. And I know that for me, I was like, I don't know that I've been through traumas, but what
Mhm.
I've come to realize is there's also those more subtle traumas, which
Yes.
is like when you are growing up and you want to have this attachment to your parents because they're looking after you. Oftentimes, you'll do things or behave in ways that you think will get the acceptance. And so
Mhm.
you repress your own self so that you can ultimately keep the attachment you have with your parents. And what that turns into is like repressing your emotions or
Yep.
disassociating.
Yes.
And it's all those things that you reconnect with that allows you to get those pieces of you again that you've given away. And I
Yes.
think that's kind of what allows you to feel more whole. At least that's what's been in my experience.
No, I
And
agree.
and I love the story that you shared, right? Like you had this terrifying fear of heights, and during an unwinding or a myofascial release seminar, which releases can come in many forms, sometimes, not all the time, but it can come in imagery. And so you might see pictures or
Hmm.
colors. And you were able to kind of relive this experience of where this fear of heights originated, ultimately process it, and then you no longer let that background message keep playing like, hey, you're in danger, you're
Right.
alone,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that we don't know that until you become aware of that. I think
Right.
for me, I've become aware of a lot of my quote unquote traumas through my marriage. I think when you're in a serious relationship, these inner child wounds will reveal themselves. And
Yes.
either you can blame your partner or you look at yourself in the mirror. And I'll say that anytime you blame somebody else or something else, you're not going to take the responsibility, and so you don't have control, and then it controls you. Versus if you actually sit with yourself and say, man, I keep behaving in this way that I don't see as being very fruitful or healthy, what is about it that makes me continue this pattern? And I'll say that it's been a journey and continues to be a journey. But I think, like your clients had mentioned, it's like, I don't think I've been through any traumas, quote unquote. It's
Right.
like, it's not these huge things all the time. Obviously, if those things are there, those
Right.
are definitely things that we can help with. But it's also those subtle things that allows you to kind of see, like, why am I behaving in the way that I have been? Is it still serving me? Or if it's not serving me, is it something that I can let go? And you were
Yeah.
able to let go of your fear of heights. And I love that story. Moving forward, I guess, like you're becoming exposed to this world that you didn't know existed. And you're having these, what I am hearing are like these big experiences that not only change your professional life, but your personal life. How did that feel through the process?
It made me it made me feel like I could find my voice again. It made me feel more whole. There were some moments in my childhood where I felt like I was being kind of kept small, and I'm not a small person. I have a pretty big personality, and I was kind of had gotten a lot of messaging about being like too much, ADHD and just kind of bouncing all over the place all the time. And now I find I actually embrace that. It's part of who I am, and I don't wanna be small. It's not who I am. I'm meant to be the large personality that I am, and I'm meant to feel all the emotions that I have, and I'm meant to be, the light that I am. We all are. But, some people have smaller personalities, some people have bigger personalities, and I embrace my larger personality now.
I love that. I think the message that comes to mind is you're not doing anyone any favors by playing small because you're scared of triggering somebody else's insecurity, you
Yeah.
know? And I think we all have a tendency to do that. We all want to fit in or feel this sense of belonging. But if that comes at the sacrifice of being who you are at the core, it's not worth it.
It
And
is
I'm
not worth it.
speaking, yeah, I'm speaking through personal experience. I think you've shared that where it's
I
like,
agree.
that's not the people you want to surround yourself with. And I'll say that in the myofascial release community, it's really helped me embrace that, where it's like, oh man, I do belong here, and I get this sense of community, and everybody encourages you
Yeah.
to shine the light that you are. Everybody is. You had mentioned that you have ADHD, is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's a
And
superpower.
okay, tell me about that. So I think typically when we hear that, it's not phrased in that way, but you've adopted it as a superpower. What does that mean to you?
It just means that I can accomplish things that most people like. I get more stuff done in one single day than most people do in a month. I mean, I have boundless energy, productivity. I can get hyper focus. One of the things about ADHD is being able to, hyper focus on things. So when I put my mind to do something, I can get it done. And I love having loads of projects going at once because it keeps life interesting. The only downside to that, I would say, is that sometimes it's hard to finish things. I tend to start like, I'll have like lots of things kind of lots of balls in the air at once. And so completing tasks can be challenge. I have to like kind of bring myself back on point. But the fact that I can get as much people are just always amazed at how much I get accomplished. And, I find that I'm actually an inspiration to a lot of people because I can do so many things and I don't ever let anybody tell me that I can't do something.
That's awesome. I think that, yeah, like nobody should be able to tell you what you can or can't do. And
Nope.
I'll say, in my experience, especially from people who aren't doing the things that you want to do, like, if I think everybody has an opinion, and I would like to believe that it comes from a good place, but if they're giving you advice on something that they've never done, or it's not a life that you even see yourself as, like, I wouldn't even consider that. And, you've mentioned about being able to start projects, but not necessarily being able to finish them as easy. Do you ever get a sense that you're not moving forward?
No, I'm definitely moving forward. It's more of a like I'll get things to like a 95% completion, like, maybe like I've built a pallet wall and then I kind of get like, okay, I've run out of steam for today. I'll go back to the next day. I'll get a little bit further along. And then I get to like 98% done. And there's just like one piece of wood that has to come out and get cut to be fitted to go around the outlet. And I'm like, that could sit for months before I go back and finish it. And I'm like, well, it's done enough for me. If it was a professional job that I was doing for somebody else, obviously I would have to complete it. But like for me, I'm like, it's okay if something's like most of the way there and I'll eventually go back and get it all the way there, and then I'll sit down and be full of pride that I completed the project.
I mean, okay, if you're getting it 98% done, like, that's pretty good. I was thinking
Pretty
like
good.
50%.
No,
Okay,
no, 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 no.
the reason I ask is I feel like I have undiagnosed ADHD,
Oh,
and I've never gotten checked for that, but I know that I can get really hyper focused on something. And
yeah,
I think that's what helps me be a therapist, because like you're just zoned in, and I
right.
love that feeling. And it's easy for me to start projects, but it's harder for me to finish them, just kind of like how you mentioned. But it sounds like for your projects, you get to like 98%, you're like, I'm good, and like, I'll call it a day, good enough.
Good
Which
enough.
me, I feel like I open up so many projects, and then I'll start, I do like 10% each one, and then I kind of feel like I'm overloaded, and then it's hard for me to like
Yeah,
do something. I usually have to cut something out. So something that I've had to adopt for myself is like I max out at 4 things of keeping on top of things. And if I
yeah.
ever want to add anything, I
You
have
have
to
to
take
finish.
something out. Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's like, so that I don't just keep adding and adding. And I know that my mental state, I just start feeling like fatigue and tired because I have these things just playing on in my mind, or like, oh, I got to do this or I got to do that. Versus if I like, okay, I've only got 4. And if I want to start something new, I have to finish one?
yeah.
And so I don't know if I have it. I've never gotten tested. Like, is there a test for that? You said.
There's definitely some if you Google it, you'll find like kind of the check mark box, and I checked just about every one of them.
Okay, cool.
But
And
I mean, it was quite clear when I was young. It's like we used to joke that my parents had to take a spatula to get me off the ceiling at the end of the day to like calm me down and get me to bed. I had two speeds, on and off. That was it. Like,
that's awesome. And I think I love that you've embraced it. I
oh
think a
yeah,
lot of times we are told these quote unquote things like you have ADHD or something, and that's almost thought of as like a negative.
oh,
But
it was
all that
definitely considered a negative when I was young, but I don't think of it that way now.
You got it. All it means is your brain works differently.
Differently, yeah.
That's all. Like, it doesn't
Yep,
mean it's better, doesn't mean that it's worse. It's just different. And if you're able to kind of look at things differently, then that's part of what makes you unique. And if you get told this message that, like, oh, you're lesser than because you have this your whole life, that is gonna, again, make you feel like you're smaller than you actually are. And so
right,
I love that you've kind of gone through this journey and have seen this other side. And I think, like you said, you're probably an inspiration to the people around you. You don't really know what effects you have on others. And something we learned in subtle energy is you have an influence on everybody you interact with, and they have an influence on you. And so
Yes.
maybe you think these things aren't that big of a deal, but to somebody, I know myself included, I'm like, dang, you're knocking out all these projects at 98%. I actually think that's pretty amazing
Thank you.
versus most people like don't even have the courage to start things, you know?
Right.
So that's like
I don't
not
even
a
think twice
problem.
about it. It's built into my DNA.
You got it. And you've gotten to this place in life where you've embraced it. And I think that goes to show that like anybody who has quote unquote something different, I don't even want to call it like a disability because
Right.
it just makes you different, then use those to your strengths because
Yep.
I think those things are the things that make you unique and kind of allows you to kind of perceive the world and put your brushstrokes on it in the way that you're meant to because you can't be anybody else, you know?
Right.
What comes to mind for me is, in Eskimo or Inuit cultures, if you were born with quote unquote a disability, you were automatically promoted to the chief of the tribe. And that's
Really?
yes, because you only knew what was important to the tribe. You weren't kind of stuck doing kind of the material world things because you think differently. And so that's something that I wanted to mention for anybody because I think a lot of us have that. For me, I'll be vulnerable here. I got held back in the first grade. Okay. So
They were gonna hold me back from like 8th to ninth, I think, or no, well, 9th to 10th, and I just switched schools so I didn't have to do that.
okay,
Do
so
math. I was like, that was my weakness. That's my Achilles heel. My kryptonite is math. Like,
yeah, hey, it's
oh,
not
I
for
hire
everybody.
somebody else to do it now.
Yeah, exactly. Now you just hire somebody else. For me, I believe that I grew up with dyslexia, but I never got tested for it. Both of my parents were college educated, so they just never thought anything was wrong with me. But I really remember struggling in reading and writing. And there's this one exercise where I remember we had to cut out these words and make a sentence out of the words. And the only thing that I knew was the big letter or the capital letter started the sentence and then the punctuation ended the sentence. But anything
Oh
in the middle
wow.
was just mixed around, right?
Wow.
But, I think again, if you were to say, "Hey, you have dyslexia," and someone told me that and I would feel down about myself, I would have this belief that I was lesser than.
Right.
Where I found that that's become my superpower is I actually think in pictures. And so when I am learning anatomy or I'm doing like a gait assessment or a walking assessment, I actually am picturing how it looks under the skin, all the muscles, the bones, and how they move. And it's very different than someone who only rationalizes things by words.
Right.
And so again, I think the message that I'm trying to say here is just embrace your own uniqueness and whether it's thinking differently or any of those challenges that you've had,
Mhm.
allow yourself to be you.
Yes.
And so you had gone through this process and it sounds like you've gone through this inner journey.
Very
What
much so.
what prompted you to start your own practice?
Oh gosh, that was just a given. I don't even know where that I didn't want to work for somebody else. I had worked for Polaroid for like 5 years when I was in the corporate world, and when they finally let me go when they were downsizing, I was like I kept saying, pick me," like I couldn't wait to get out. And so when they downsized me, I was basically doing cartwheels out the door. I was so happy because I was like, I'm going to go do what I want to do now. I'm not going to do what society tells me I'm supposed to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. And I knew I wanted to put hands on bodies. So I went to massage school and just immediately, and my son was born like as I was graduating from massage school. And so I kind of slowly started to practice, but always worked for myself. And no, well, no, yeah, actually, I did. I always worked for myself. I didn't work for any companies. So, and it just always felt right to me because I could build my practice, around my schedule and my timing and my abilities. And then when I started introducing the John's work into, John Barnes's work into my practice, it was like everything just kind of shifted and exploded. And it's just grown and grown and grown. And then, I left Massachusetts a couple of years ago and came up here to Maine to work full time. And I was a little nervous, being in my 60s, being like, oh my gosh, how am I going to start like a whole brand? Like I had a thriving practice down there, working like 20 hours, 27 hours a week. And which, as you know, in body work is, a considerable amount. That's a lot of hours. and was a little nervous about how it was gonna go up here. And I hit the ground running. It was like immediately, like, you work on one person, and then they tell two friends, and then they tell two friends, and then next thing you know, you've got a thriving practice again. So it's been exciting.
Okay, that's amazing. I think what's interesting when I'm hearing it from you is you just trust what you're feeling, you
I
know?
do.
And I don't know that everybody does that. I know myself, I might feel a certain way and then I'll have this inner conflict because I have to like reason it out.
Right.
Have you always been so intuitive?
No, I feel that's something that's come with John's work. That definitely was something that came with his work. It had to do with getting to know myself better and understanding myself and healing my traumas, becoming the more whole person that I am, and then just craving more and more and more information, like wanting to learn, like continue to learn. I wasn't a great student. The ADHD was hard. Growing up, I wasn't a great student. I was smart. I was always smart, but not necessarily intuitive, not always socially aware. So I think a lot of that came with taking the classes. And then when I started to like take, John's classes and just really and I remember actually sitting down with my dad to kind of go back a step because as I mentioned, my dad was a radiologist. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table here with him and going through my flashcards and like having him look at the flashcards and me recite like the nerves and the, various body systems and such. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that you had to know so much from massage, like to get, your certificate for massage." And I was like, "Oh yeah." And he was like, "You have to know like the cellular, like everything. You have to really know everything and pathology." And I'm like, "Yeah, you do." And so he was like, "Wow, you probably could have been a doctor if you had really wanted to go into that." And that just it felt so good to be recognized that I have an intellect that is valuable and that I wasn't just a poor learner, or I just had to learn differently, like you were talking about, like learning differently. And so I've become more and more hungry to learn more and more things, and when I get exposed to something new, I'm like, I want to now I want to try that, and I want to try that, and I'm like, there's just not enough time. I want 2 lifetimes or 3 lifetimes so I can learn all of the fun things that I want to like chuck in my tool chest and learn about myself, and just keep on learning. I love learning.
I think that's amazing. And on this topic of learning, you've done something I think it's totally normal and I am applauding you for it, but it can seem a little bit taboo in the MFR community. And
Yeah.
you taken a craniosacral class.
Yeah.
Can you speak on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the reason I took the class was I had been having some problems with my right leg and my left hip that myofascial wasn't necessarily resolving completely. And I didn't want to go the medical route with having shots and all that kind of thing. And so I was having a friend of mine who was a craniosacral therapist work on me. And she did some work on my right leg, and she was listening to my right leg at my lower leg, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm listening to the craniosacral rhythm." And I was like, "Wait a minute, hold on, like hold the door." I Maybe I have a misunderstanding of what the craniosacral rhythm is. So I became curious, especially since she really helped me to finally resolve the issue that I had been having in my leg, and some of the numbness and the pain that I had been having resolved. So I was quite curious about it. And then I saw an ad on Facebook for, the up ledger class. And I was like, all right, I'm going to take this class. And I have heard that people use, certainly craniosacral work is incorporated in the Barnes, techniques. So I was fascinated by, I wanted to kind of look in, like, what's this all about? I want to see if it, and turns out it really blends and meshes beautifully with myofascial release. It's not a completely opposite. It works. They're two different modalities, but they do work in tandem.
And what does that mean? So I have yet to take a craniosacral class. And
Okay.
so I'm just kind of trying to understand it. And I know that we have a bit of like, hey, try to feel the craniosacral rhythm. And so that's maybe sprinkled in with myofascial release. But
Yeah.
you've taken this class where you're like, you know what? It's this body of work that blends well. What about it necessarily blends well?
Well, there are parts that are very different than myofascial release in terms of, it's not a sustained deeper pressure because you're acknowledging the fascial system, but you're really working with the cranial fluid, and you're working with the bones more, and it's a fully clothed. You can work. They actually encourage you to work with clothing because you want to kind of you're feeling the fascial tissue, but you're not really engaging the fascial tissue. In fact, I'm sure you've heard John talk about, like, somebody will ask a question, how much pressure are you supposed to use? And he will, like, for years, I would hear him joke, oh, it's exactly 5 grams of pressure. And everyone would kind of laugh in the class. And it was because it's however much pressure you need when it's to engage that collagenous barrier when you're working with myofascial release. However, at the craniosacral class, they actually have a scale so that you can practice putting your hand on the scale and feeling what 5 grams of pressure is, because that is technically what they use. They go to 5 grams of pressure, and you're doing, transverse plane compression, but then, you find that 5 grams, then you back off completely, and then you sink into, maybe 5 grams, maybe it's 10 grams, maybe it's 15 grams. It's whatever needs to engage the craniosacral rhythm and to allow it to release. And so it's really fascinating that, like, I had always wondered what was this 5 grams thing all about that he would always joke about. And now I'm like, oh, now I know.
Okay. And so it sounds like you had a very positive experience, kind
I
of
thought it was wonderful.
allowed you to open up your world to this new craniosacral atmosphere.
Yeah.
And you're saying it's helping you, right? Like I guess, was there unwinding or were there certain elements there that leave?
So like, yeah, so I think that I know that there is unwinding, but in this particular first class, they were very respectful of my training, being an expert level therapist, so to speak. They were very respectful in terms of, like, not poo-pooing myofascial release by any stretch. However, they did ask me to try to stay heavy and present in my body for this particular class. Now, and I have actually signed up for the other ones because, me, I like to, as I said, I just eat it all up. I did sign up for the core package to be able to take Craniosacral 2 and the somatic 2 trainings that they have. And those ones, from what I understand, actually do go into unwinding and do go into, more of the emotional release. I think we call it somatic emotional release
Mm,
or somato emotional release. So I do believe that there is unwinding. I think that there's not so much the dialoguing that we do, like that we are taught some of the dialoguing. I think that they have a different way of dialoguing maybe, but they're two bodies of work that approach the body in a similar fashion, similar results, and I think that they marry really nicely. I've definitely found, so like, some of the cranial holds, the cranial vault holds are quite similar, just a lighter touch because you're working with the bone structure. And maybe the touch is actually for the cranial bones or is not lighter. Maybe I just was going heavier than I needed to. Because, as you know, like, you do a sphenoid release and you don't want to be crushing their head. I remember actually one time being in a class and Donna coming up behind me and being like, I was like holding it, like, really holding, like, underneath the jaw or something. And she was like, it's a baby's head. It's a baby's head. Like, take it easy. Like, lighten your touch. You don't need to be like, so it was actually, it's been a nice thing to bring into my myofascial treatments of, like, less can often be more,
mhm.
especially when you're doing, like, the temporal releases and the sphenoid release and jaw release. I mean, all of those things. Yeah. And from what I understand, there's also intraoral work with craniosacral too. So I'm looking forward to taking that as well. But I'm really looking forward to the somatic. I think that's going to be really interesting.
I would love to hear your
Yeah.
experience. And I think when you first posted that, Carol Davis even commented and like, "Oh, gentle holds are
Yeah.
what helps the fascial system and
Yep.
you feeling and like feeling vulnerable and feeling safe." And
Yeah.
so whether it's MFR, whether it's craniosacral, I think it's just that gentle touch
Yeah.
that often gets overlooked. I know that a lot of times people want like deep tissue
Right.
massages with a lot of pressure, and if it's not painful then it's not helping. But I've met and worked with tons of people who have had those things and they felt worse after, you know?
Yep.
And so I think it's just going in with an open mind. I think what I love about you taking that is like, yeah, I just want to learn have an open mind. It sounds like they knew that you were an expert level, like you revealed that. And but you're still able to learn something new and take something away for you to bring back to your
Yeah,
practice. And your practice is called Rivermead Retreat. Is that
retreats. Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Yeah, talk us through that. How did you start that and what has that journey been like?
So this property was it's an 18-room house on 7 acres of land on the York River overlooking a golf course in York, Maine, and it was built in 1750, so it's like an old farmhouse. And when my parents passed away and left it to my brother and I, it was, either we're going to sell it, which just was like, no, you just don't sell a property like this, or we share it. And like, we have two very different lives. So it really came down to like, do you want to buy my half out? So I bought his half out of my brother's half out of the house. And then it was like, okay, well, this place needs to be shared. It needs to be a healing retreat where people can come and, it's like almost like feels like the Sedona vortexes in a way where you come and you just feel the healing and the love and the energy of the land. And the barn, I fixed the barn all up. I saved it from falling down and, replaced the roof and replaced a bunch of the floorboards and the doors and put some fun lighting up in there. So I do retreats out there in the summertime, and I actually host study groups that Carol Davis comes and talks and leads the study groups. We do those in the summertime. I've had retreats here that are, psychic readings and tarot cards and biofield tuning and Ayurvedics and myofascial release and unwinding and shamanistic things. And, Molly McMillan has come and done, a couple of shaman trainings here, her power retrieval retreats. So, we do all sorts of things here. And then of course I have my myofascial release practice just in a room. And then I have rooms that I rent out for people that want to come and stay and have like a mini intensive type thing. Or if they just want to come for a weekend, maybe have one session and then go to the beach or go kayaking or go walk in the field or whatever. So it's a great place for it really lends itself to the healing arts and to any art, any creativity, healing arts, writing, painting, forest bathing, silent retreats. I mean, there's so much you can do here.
I love that. To me, it sounds like it scratches that ADHD itch. It's like you can do anything and everything you want. So I love that. And so, okay, if someone wanted to work with you, how would they find you?
They would go to rivermeadretreat.com, and it's MED, not the drink, not MEAD, as sometimes people will pop that in. I probably should buy that URL too, or put that as a word, because people always spell it wrong. But it's the name of the property has been Rivermead for since 1750. So it's
I love that. Cool. Well, I just want to
loaded with spirit. It's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely want to visit sometime. Now, I just want to thank you for being so open and honest with us. I really loved this conversation, you being able to share kind of the things that you've gone through, and you're a constant learner. And so whether that's myofascial release or something that you're stepping into that has captured your curiosity, I love that you just take those steps without thinking about it. I think for me, I don't always trust that feeling, and so it's like there's a lot of hesitation and I get in my own way. And from what I'm hearing from you, you're like, yo, if you just feel it, just trust it and don't look back, because all of that worry, that's not really helping anybody. It's just making things worse for you. Now, before we get out of here, is there any last message you'd like to share with my audience?
Just trust your intuition, trust your gut. Your gut never lies. If you want to do something, go for it. Hang out with the people that say, hey, why not? What a great idea. Why not? Instead of the people that go, why would you do that? Like, hang out with the people that say, why not?
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.